This is the great finale of a year that will undoubtedly remain written in the history of humanity. Together, we will listen to the testimonies of heroes of our communities, heroes of the faith, leaders, educators, families, and resilient people who sailed into the end of this epic year called 2020.
So 2020 has been quite a year for most of us. When you think about your experiences throughout the year, what has 2020 looked like for you?
Man, 2020 has been a heck of a year, especially since the beginning of the year started off so positive. My family and I, we were positive people in general. So, but life was good, business was going great, things were growing. And then kind of boom, carpet pulled right out from under us with this whole COVID virus thing. So obviously first and foremost, we're concerned about safety and health and stuff. But then the concern quickly turns to, what are we going to do? How are we going to live? What's going to happen?
It's been quite a journey. I managed the theater, and the first part of the year, we had really come to life. We've been transitioning this theater from kind of a local hometown kind of thing to more, we've been bringing in a lot of international acts and some Broadway and trying to put it on the map a little bit. And we were heading into March with a bunch of sold out shows and a lot of people in seats. And then we just hit a wall and it just stopped. And for us, in fact, the day that they put a stay at home in order, we had a show that night that we had to just pull the plug on immediately. So it was like going downhill and hitting this brick wall, and made adjustments, and it's been interesting.
A year of strength, a year of challenge and testing parts of yourself that you haven't experienced before, maybe didn't know you had the ability to do some of the things that 2020 has forced us to do. Mm-hmm.
2020 has been a challenging year, and at the same time has provided an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for creativity and innovation. So in the midst of even the most challenging circumstances, it's amazing how the human spirit pushes through, and the mind, the heart, we're not just a physical body. There's so much more beyond what we can see with our eyes. So I think that despite the challenges, the adversities even that have come about in 2020, it's been amazing to see the human spirit pull through and persevere, and I know we're going to get through this.
2020 has been very interesting, to say the least, for me and our community. One of my most important roles is as the mayor of Coral Springs. And I remember vividly having to call an emergency meeting on March 13 when we first heard about some devastating effects of COVID, and we decided to have all of our meetings virtual since then. And there was a good amount of panic, and I wanted to make sure that our community respected the virus without having to feel fear of the virus. And our communications team and their city manager, really everybody up and down in our city really did a great job of informing and educating our citizens without having to scare them. And that's been one thing that I think we've met that challenge in many ways here at the city.
For me, 2020 has been an eye-opener. I think prior to this year, so much of my life has been consumed with work and the kids and, being a wife, being a friend, attending church, and just busy, right? And never really taking the time to sit back and kind of evaluating what is truly important. And I think we were kind of forced to do that this year. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but this has definitely been a year where I did a lot of self-reflecting, a lot of self-evaluating, kind of just looking at what's truly important in my life.
For me, 2020 has been a year of ups and downs, not unlike a lot of other years, but this year kind of a confluence of three huge cataclysmic events going on at the same period of time. Obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, the elections in the United States, and the level of political discourse that we have, or lack of positive discourse for sure, as well as the whole issue of race imbalance and civil unrest following the unfortunate deaths involving law enforcement. So together, all of that has done nothing but increase the stress level of those that I take care of. And as a public safety chaplain, my job is to walk alongside our fire rescue personnel as well as our law enforcement officers and help them where I can, listen to them, be available for them and for their families and our retired people. And being a firefighter, paramedic, law enforcement officer is stressful enough on a normal day. In a situation like 2020 has been, if all these forces just increasing their level of stress tremendously.
2020 has been a very unique year. The whole face of the world has changed, the way we do things in the world. Just think, people were walking in fear, a lot of them. They were afraid, because when they look at the camera on TV and saw people in the world with masks on in China, Japan, Germany, Korea, and then we found that things have changed the way we do things. The city starts shutting down, the country starts shutting down. Restaurants, doctor's office, hotels, the schools. It affected almost every place where things changed. And for some reason, I always thought it was imagination. I couldn't believe this happened. It has never happened before. But we had to deal with the changes. And then we had to start wearing masks, sanitizer, washing your hands continuously, social distancing for safety, so you won't get the disease. And what a change.
It's a year where people have had to adjust to some drastic and significant change, demonstrating resilience because they were able to do it, and seeing so many different people in so many different ways, recognizing that their entire way of interacting with the world had to change. But it has certainly been a year of learning patience, learning to adjust, learning that, you know what, we really can make a change for the safety of others, and that really was the key. It's not just about our own safety, it's about everyone's safety.
2020 for me was a challenge, as it was for many people. The interesting thing about me is that in 2019, I had worked on a specific client in the cruise industry, believe it or not. And the hardest part about that was that as this came around, working on a client, if you know what it's like to, and they say to get a client takes a long time, to lose one it's very fast. And to get a client was very difficult. So my wife and I, who's my business partner, we worked on this client for almost a year. And it was a very, very, a very well-branded company, and we were proud. And we were actually excited about it. And 2020 came around, and it's interesting because when they came around, I had spoken with the cruise director, and he said, you know, I was just in China, and something weird is coming. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, they almost quarantined me, and I'm not really sure, but something doesn't feel right. And I took that home to my wife, and we kind of discussed it a little bit. I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about, but everything was going fine. It was you know, we were doing well. We had onboarded them. We were excited about where we were headed. And within a matter of 3 weeks, it just completely shifted. And I got a call, and the call told me we're not moving forward with anything. And I don't know if you've ever had the wind knocked out of you, but it was very distressful. And I told my wife, I said, she came home and she said, so how did it go? And I said, they've pulled the plug on everything. And we both just looked at each other, and we were just kind of a little confused. And, you know, it was a scary moment because we weren't sure what was going to happen. We invested a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy in that product and that customer, and to know that they'd pull the plug because of what was coming. Within 2 weeks of that, they were close to filing bankruptcy. The pandemic had hit them very hard. They also were very scared. And I got this feeling along everybody that I spoke to that they were frightened. And for me, that was a very big challenge. So I think that it's harder for people to understand how to deal with that scared feeling. And that's kind of where I started to think differently. And my wife said, well, what are we going to do? And I said, we're going to move forward, because that's what it's all about.
The way I've looked at 2020 from a personal perspective and a business perspective is change. Yeah. I think that's the easiest way to put it. Being flexible, being able to pivot, as you would say in business, right? You'd have to be able to pivot, and in life we just got to change. And I think what it is we've become so comfortable with the way things used to be that now with the COVID-19 coming into 2020, it's made us have to look at, I guess, our lives and our decisions, and forced us to move into a different direction. A great example, outside we were talking about the way I looked at COVID-19 and the way the pandemic hit us all. I looked at it from a global perspective. Like, it is a global issue, and it is something that we can't see, we can't fight. And originally I said the last time we had something like this was World War II, right? World War is really the name. But then we came to realize that, no, it's not just, that wasn't the last thing. We had HIV 30 years ago. About 30 years ago, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong with my math. So about 30 some odd years ago. And we've had to change our entire life from that. Before, we didn't have the true knowledge of how it came about, so on and so forth, how you can contact, how you can become affected or anything. We didn't think about that. Now, once we had that knowledge, then we had to change. COVID-19 is the same thing. We didn't know how you get COVID-19. Oh my God, it's in the air, it's in the ground, it's in my skin, it's in everything. And now we're getting more knowledge behind it, more information, more data. Now what we do with that data is very important. Mm-hmm. We can choose to empower each other with it, and then we can adjust, and then we can grow from there. We can evolve into the next state of us being human beings.
Anytime that you have a struggle, I think there's a byproduct of goodness. I mean, I've seen a lot of good things in 2020. A lot of people have come together. Obviously we've had to change the way we do everything, which has meant, thinking outside the box, which has meant, really coming up with creative ways and being more patient with each other. And so for all that it's brought us, I think it's brought us closer together. The old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, I think applies. I think when we come out of this on the backside, I'd like to think that we will be more prepared for the next time, stronger and a little wiser. So, you got to take the good and the bad.
It's one thing to see the world and its crisis like that of 2020, but then it's another thing to actually experience the horror of COVID up close. To have it in the body and to be directly affected, it's a different feeling.
And picking up on your military background, yes, right? How would you perhaps describe COVID as a type of enemy? I mean, how would we talk about COVID in those terms?
Okay, looking at COVID and from my military perspective, right? It's something you can't just strategize. You can, the enemy's gonna move this way. And so now we're gonna put a line of defense over there, and we're gonna put them in a pincer over here. It's not happening with COVID. We're flying blind. And I laugh about it because it's like you would think you take the entire playbook and throw it out, but don't do that. Once we get enough data, like I said before, once we get enough data
then now we can apply those strategies that we've used in the past. But we just don't know enough about it. That's the problem. And from a military perspective, you want to know your enemy. You want to be able to see your enemy, you know, and understand where they're trying to get to.
I take care of my 98-year-old aunt several days a week, and back at the end of March, we noticed that my aunt was losing her appetite. She didn't have a fever, she wasn't coughing, she wasn't sneezing, or at least not more than her usual. And but we were a little concerned because she was not eating well. After 2 weeks of not eating and barely drinking any liquids, any fluids, we were very concerned, and we decided that we needed to seek medical attention. So I helped my aunt into my car, and I drove her to a local hospital, where as soon as I was walking in with her in her wheelchair through the front door, I was told that I'm not able to go with her, and they took her in. I said goodbye to her at the door and tried to explain to her as best as I could that the doctors were just going to check her out. So within a few minutes of having my aunt go through, actually it was probably close to an hour, I received a call from the nurses letting me know that my aunt had tested positive for COVID. And as such, I also needed to go get tested. So my 98-year-old aunt, who for the first time in her life was seeing herself in a hospital, she had never been in a hospital at all, and now she was a patient in a hospital. She didn't really understand what was going on. She was taken from her family, and she was still confused, and she was put on a floor where there were other COVID patients. So the nurses and the doctors who were attending to her didn't just wear a mask. They're wearing their full PPE. They're wearing all of the headgear and the shields and the gloves and the scrubs, covers, and they appeared to be like aliens to her. She was very scared. It was very traumatizing. They tried their best. They tried to calm her down, but my aunt, who is hard of hearing and can't see well and doesn't understand English and didn't understand because of her age everything that is going on, had at times to be restrained because she just wanted to leave. She tried to escape several times. I was able to come to an agreement with the doctors and nurses, asking them please that before they administered any sedation that they would call me and put me on the phone with her, because she's not able to call anyone out herself. She doesn't have that capability. And I would talk to her and I would try to calm her down. And that worked several times. And then 6 days later, my 98-year-old aunt was discharged, and she came home very confused but very grateful. I remember seeing her as she was wheeled in through the front door, that she had tears that were running down her face, because at one point in time she was afraid that she was never going to see her family again. So she's home, and last Saturday she celebrated her 99th birthday. And she is doing very well. She's eating, she's drinking, and she's carrying on her normal life. And we're very, very grateful and very blessed to have her with us. She doesn't remember a lot about her time in the hospital. Perhaps it's part her age and her memory, and part I believe it's it was a very emotional and traumatic time for her, and I think she really doesn't want to remember a lot of what happened there. But she's home and doing well.
I had a friend pastor who was a pastor for 50 years. She and her husband were in the hospital because they got COVID. Her husband got out of the hospital, but she died. It shocked everybody because she lives right here in Coral Springs. It really surprised me. Also, I had family members who have a daughter-in-law who works at Cleveland Clinic. She checked in patients, wound up with the COVID, gave the whole family the COVID. So they were all separated from the rest of us. And we were so surprised. One of the members had to go in the hospital because as a kid he had asthma. He had breathing problems, so he's okay now. The whole family has recovered. But it surprised us.
COVID has probably, certainly from a newsworthiness standpoint, been the lead of the day. And COVID-19 has impacted, I mean, fire rescue and police have very similar kinds of stressors and so forth in their lives. But the one unifying stress that I'm finding with both those professionals is the fear of taking this disease home. it's an issue with our behavioral health program, obviously, in dealing with police and firefighter stress. That's part of our jobs as chaplains, as therapists, as peer support people and clinicians. That said, the additional stress of now taking home not just the bad stories and the day-to-day stress of the job, but I might be contaminated. What I'm wearing might have viruses on it that can infect my family at home.
So COVID-19 has definitely creeped its way in to my family. My husband's side of the family, we've to date maybe a total of 19 cases amongst them. Thank God that they've all recovered, and they went through the basic symptoms, but they were able to recover from it. Unfortunately, my godson's grandmother, she contracted COVID about 2 months ago. She spent 3 weeks in the hospital, and unfortunately she couldn't, defeat that battle, but we know we'll see her again on the other side. So that has been tough for them. I don't think they've really kind of grasped the magnitude of what has really happened. They haven't really had a chance to mourn that loss. Just last week, a really close friend of mine sent me a text message and asked if I could be in prayer for her and her family. Her nephew, unfortunately, was in the kitchen cooking and he collapsed. And so now we are like 4 days into that, realizing that he also passed away due to complications due to COVID. He leaves behind 3 boys and a wife, and they are now just trying to figure out how to pick the pieces up and, where do we begin from here? Today, one of my close friends, who's also a colleague, called and shared that her test was positive and she contracted it from the office. But she's in good spirits, and we're praying and we're trusting and believing God. And, we ended that call with a laugh like we always do. And so I know that, he'll see her through. But it's definitely all around me, for sure. Not just something I'm watching on television, but having to encourage family members and friends. And it's difficult. It's difficult.
The body of each person reacts differently to the virus, and each person acts differently to a crisis.
The moment that really was impactful for me was, we are an intermediate care unit, and are the only unit that really could support our ICU team. And it's been an amazing journey working alongside our ICU team. I have a very long corridor that enters my unit. And when we were first admitting our ICU patients up to the unit, their beds are very different, lots of technology. They've got lights, and they're bigger than our beds, and our ICU patients have a lot of different machines hooked up to them. And early on, when we were now becoming the second home of the ICU team, my double doors opening and having a team escort a patient with all of their machines safely and swiftly. It felt like a space shuttle coming through, entering my home and being a safe haven. Oh, that got me emotional. Where we were going to take care of someone in their most vulnerable state. And just everyone around that bed, all working to get that patient safely to their room. That was the first time that it hit me, wow, this is happening, this is real, and we're doing this. That was a pivotal moment, and that happened very early on. And then it's game on from there. It's okay, this is what we're doing. Let's go.
Okay, so the first, few days we were like, oh, no school, it's gonna be a long break, long spring break. And then we realized, well, it's not a long spring break, it's gonna be a long year. So,
at the beginning, I kind of enjoyed it because, you know, you get to go home, you know, you do online school. It's kind of like a new dynamic. But then as soon as the rhythm started, I was a little shocked, and, you know, I became a little isolated. I am like I'm the only child at home, so I did start, you know, talking to the wall and stuff like that, and talking to my dog. But no, I feel like I reflected and I grew as a person. I did become more focused and more ambitious, you know. I realized, like,
very true.
You know, I want to become an engineer, and I really realized, like, this is what I really want to do. I started watching documentaries on Netflix, you know, just trying to get more into what I like and what I can see my future.
The community should be very concerned that the emotional and mental health of the teachers is just not being met. I believe the districts are trying. You know, this is new for all of us. There's no manual to follow. There's no flow chart that we could go to and refer to on how to address some of these issues. But we have educators that have been in this profession for, let's say, 20, 30, even in some cases 40 years. I have a friend that's 72 years old and she's still teaching, and she loves it, and she hasn't been able to interact with the kids, you know, more so for her health. But they're going to have to start considering some type of programs, because this is taking an emotional toll on all of us across the board. And yes, we are essential workers. Teachers are essential workers. We're very much so needed, the pillars of the community, but we're real and we're human. And we have families, we have kids, husbands and wives, we have friends. And I have heard about teachers getting ill during this time. And kind of through hearsay, not like, you know, as a support network of, okay, let's reach out and support this one, or what can we do to support this family now that they're out ill. And it's kind of like they've been forgotten. Let's move right along, because we have to do the job. We have to do the job. So I think moving forward, that is definitely a conversation that is going to have to be had. You know, how do we support teachers mentally? How do we support their emotional stability?
You know, we never think about like PTSD in the nursing world. We do deal with life and death situations, but you kind of keep it moving, or the next situation allows you to kind of recoup and make it through the rest of the day. A therapist is huge. I started therapy, I started going back to therapy in the beginning. I knew that this was going to be something that I couldn't challenge. I couldn't do it alone, and I was going to need to decompress with someone who I can trust in a confidential platform, you know. And so that allowed me to pour back in to my staff, and, you know, just be ready for anything. That's the biggest things. The change that can happen from 1 minute to the next, and just always being ready.
Public safety professionals, firefighters and police officers, we lose twice as many to their own hand, to suicide, a year than we do to line of duty death. They have 4 times the rate of suicide that a civilian person has. 4 times. So it's a significant danger to people that are in that business. So what we try to do through our suicide education and prevention program is to educate them, and it's applicable to the general community at large as well, that if you see something, if you see a change in behavior, if you see someone who appears depressed, acts depressed, you say something. You're very direct with them. And then you make sure that you get them into the appropriate referral pattern, somebody that can really do something about it. The days of having a suicide and come to find out the person has been obviously depressed for weeks or months before it, and people around them either haven't noticed it, needs to change.
I think the community and this theater are bound together for years. This theater's been here long before I was here, 20-something years it's operated. And one of the elements that I don't know if everyone's aware of, but we run something called Next Stop Broadway here, which is a theatrical camp and education system that when we're not doing shows, we have kids from the community here all the time. During the summer, we'll have over 300 kids a day here going through different theater classes. We do 3-week sessions at the end of every 3-week session. the kids get to perform on this stage a Broadway musical, a Broadway show of some sort. The opportunity that this theater gives the whole community is so important, I think, for people and their mental health, and the experiences that we offer just help make people whole, I think. You can't live in worry, worry, worry without a release of enjoyment and getting the juices flowing for some happiness and some smiles. I mean, I've always said my job is to make people smile. And it doesn't matter what the show is. The show could be a tearjerker, but when they leave, they're going to smile. And that's what I've prided myself with my whole career. But the big part of that is making people whole and just helping them with their psyches and it's a distraction. Show business is a distraction from all the pain and anguish in your life, and we want to do that well. So taking it away from the community for this period of time, it's really, in a way, harsh.
We've started talking a lot lately about isolation and just our concern about mental health for people age 60 and older. So if you had to make a comment, regarding mental health for people age 60 and older, I mean, what kind of message could you share with us? What should we be concerned about, thinking about, looking at?
I think isolation is the key. I think having contact, human contact, is critical. I went through about a 10-week isolation, but again, I have a very supportive wife and we went through it together, obviously. But I can't imagine, had I not had Karen and I was sitting there alone. Now, luckily, in what I do, I'd pick up the phone and I'd call somebody. That's just the kind of person I am. But a lot of people don't have anybody else to call. So, it's interesting, you mentioned young adults earlier. One of the neatest programs I've seen recently is a program, and I think it may have been through the United Way or another organization like that here in Broward County. They started linking teenagers up with sheltered older people that didn't have anybody to talk to, and they just started calling them. Maybe a 10-minute limit, once a day, twice a week, I'm going to call Sarah Jane and just see how she's doing. And that really helped both ends. It helped the young adults understand I'm going to be there someday, and more importantly, it gave the sheltered elderly person someone to talk to, something to look forward to. So I think that's the biggest key to mental wellness within our aging community, and that's human contact. And it doesn't have to be face-to-face. I mean, look at what COVID's taught us. I mean, I didn't know Zoom was anything other than a fast movement prior to COVID. And now we're living on Zoom and meeting and all kinds of other social platforms out there. And we can do that with our elderly as well.
I have seen mental health be much more of a dynamic in our community and across the nation since COVID. I think everyone wants mental wellness, and people have been fearful to talk about mental illness, which includes anxiety and depression. And I think more and more people are realizing, yes, anxiety and depression, they are not a choice. Somehow, someday you may wake up with one or both. And what are my options? What do I do? So I'd say two primary contributing factors have led to me being focused on the mental wellness of our community. The number one factor is at 23 years old, unfortunately, I lost my mom to suicide, and I had no idea that she was ill, depressed, no idea. So I can imagine that many others suffer in silence. And the second impetus for me was this young man, Calvin. And I'd never met Calvin or his family. But when I got the text late on a Saturday night, March 23rd, I decided at that moment there was something I needed to do differently, especially with my capacity as mayor of the city. I'd just been sworn in about 11 days before. And I asked a few people whether they would support me in creating this new alliance and eliminate the stigma. That was our tag back then. Now our tagline is Break the Stigma. And we're a Facebook group. This month we've had 2 meetings. Last week's meeting, we paid special tribute to veterans who are one of the pockets that have to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder and often suicide. And those two stimuli have really created a passion in me to help break the stigma, not just in our community, but across the nation.
In our community, in our church family, I have seen others struggle with isolation, feeling like they're the only ones going through these emotions, feeling alone and maybe as if no one else would understand them. And it has been very important when I've reached out and made that connection, or maybe it hasn't been me, it has been someone else on our staff or leadership team that has reached out and just made that connection and kind of had the opportunity for that person to be vulnerable and really be able to say what they're struggling with. I think that has been, it seems something simple, but really it's caused a lot of breakthroughs, because I think that many times we believe this lie that we're the only ones that feel this way. We're the only ones going through this situation, or feeling, isolated, or feeling alone, or feeling depressed, or feeling anxiety, or feeling fear. And so when we're able to finally speak that out, and say it, and just have someone else hear us and be able to walk us through that and encourage us and pray with us, it's really been a very powerful thing. And I think that's why it's so important for us to allow those groups, like our small groups, our life groups, for people to have that more intimate setting where we're able to kind of take off our masks and not have to be, I think many times in life we have to put on this mask and be strong and kind of push through and persevere, which is important. But there are moments, there have to be those people in our lives that we are able to feel safe with, that we're able to feel that we're going to be cared for, and we can take off our mask and be real about what we're struggling with, whether it's something personal inside, whether it's relationally. I know when my relationships aren't doing well, that affects how I see everything. So just having those opportunities to be able to open up our hearts really and hear what we're really going through has been really helpful.
My cousin and I were horsing around, and he held me under a little too long, and so when I came out, my neurological connection was water is bad. So that's how I experienced it. And my father, who was a cop, police officer on the east side of Chicago, wasn't going to have that. He's not going to have a son who's afraid of the water. So he took our family to a cabin. Every year he would take us to a cabin until I got used to getting close to the water. And the closer I got, I might see my sisters playing around the water, I'd get a little closer, and I'd start to experience that. And one day I woke up in the morning and I was standing near the water, and after about 4 years of him taking us to the same cabin every year to experience water, he came around and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, I'm kind of scared, just like all of us are. And he said, "We have to take the first step, but it has to be done by you." And I said, "Okay, I'm ready." And he said, "Climb on my back, I'm going to swim you out to a wooden pier." And I said, "Great, let's do it." So the first step in what I reflect on is you need to do it yourself. No one can force you to do it. You have to make that first step yourself. And my father swam me out to this floating pier, and I stood on this pier, and I looked around at all the cabins that surrounded this one little lake. And from a different perspective, you see so many different things. Birds flying, trees out there. It was just amazing. And as I stood there, I thought, the second lesson is you have to have a different perspective on everything. If you don't change your perspective, it's not going to change. So my father said, "Jump to me," okay? And I said, "Okay." He said, "I'll catch you." And I jumped off the pier, and he moved. And I kind of scrambled up to the top of the surface, scared as heck. It's about the time Jaws came out, so we all know how that made everybody feel. So as I was scrambling through the water, I could see him with this smile on his face, and he just kept saying, "Come closer, come closer." And I just started swimming towards him, scrambling towards him. And as I kept going towards him, basically because I wanted to wring his neck, he just kept moving closer to the shore. And as he did, I got up on the shore, and I had swam that whole distance. I was very angry, I'm not going to lie. I was pretty ticked off. And I said, "Why did you do that to me? Why would you leave me in the water when you know I can't swim?" And he said, "Son, this is something you'll remember for the rest of your life." He said, "Challenges are windows to change."
There have been challenges in my life that have prepared me for this moment. At age 14, I left home. for some personal reasons with my parents, just kind of weren't seeing eye to eye. And I think I was ready to conquer the world. So I left home really early, lived with a few family members here and there, and eventually got my own apartment at age 16 and still attended school. At age 18, unfortunately, my dad passed away 3 days after Thanksgiving, and 3 days before Christmas, my mom passed away. And so when we talk about a 2020 COVID experience, I had my 2000 experience. And I always get the question of, well, how did you do it? How did you get through that? I can't tell you how. All I know is I kept going. And so when I talked about that resilience and kids having resilience and being able to get through life challenges without crumbling, that moment I learned how to deal with life. I had no other choice but to learn how to deal with life. It was either sink or swim, and I decided to swim. And so as tough as it was, and as tough as it continues to be, I have my moments where I look back and losing both of my parents, in less than a month of each other around the holiday season was tough, but I still had to continue. I remembered what they instilled in me, which was hard work, dedication, focus. You take care of yourself. You don't depend on people. And so there were a lot of foundational pieces that my dad passed on that when he passed on, they still continued through me. And so my children, I think they feed off of that strength. We keep no secrets in our home. My husband also experienced the loss of his parents very early in life. When he was age 4, his father passed away, and then 3 years later, his mom. And so that is the story of our family. We know loss, we know hard times, we know hardship, but we also know strength, and we know faith, and we know that God is real, and He's a keeper, right? And He gives us peace, He gives us wisdom, and He sets paths for us. And as long as we trust and we believe in Him, then there's nothing that we can overcome. We tell them that every day. Each and every day, they truly know there is nothing that you cannot overcome. And so again, this COVID, as real and raw and difficult as it may be, this too shall pass. And this tool we'll use as a testimony. Again, somewhere down the line, they'll be telling their kids about when they had to transition and go to school online, and they couldn't see friends, and so they learned how to be real savvy with the phone. But it'll be a good testimony of strength and endurance, and I'm just happy to be here to share that with my kids.
Probably the biggest preparation that I've had is that my children's grandmother worked in the Twin Towers, and she perished on 9/11. And our whole world just was uprooted and changed. And at the time, I was running an entertainment business up out of New York with, again, several people working for me. We're a production company. We produced the shows that would come onto stages like this. And I had to navigate through that period of time from a business standpoint, also while my personal life was kind of in huge turmoil. But we steered through it. We survived it. And then when I got older, that also led, frankly, to a horrible divorce. When an event like that happens, and the world crumbles, the blame and the anger, it's just all, you talk about mental health. I mean, it's really devastating. And while personally, my marriage didn't come out of it as strongly as I would have liked, my business did, and we maintained and we kept moving forward. The next thing that happened in my life is I fell in love with a woman whose son had cancer and battled leukemia for 7 years. And I was at their side, and there is nothing like a training field like that, because you're dealing with health issues, emotional issues, financial issues. You could layer everything, every bad emotion you could possibly have, you go through dealing with that. And I'm very happy to say he came out the other side, and he is my 19-year-old living out on his own now, which frightens Mom and I, but he's doing it. So, but that period of time helped me learn how to navigate through some of the toughest things that I could possibly go through, both personally and financially and in business. This pandemic, to me, it's a huge problem, but I know that I can handle it. And what's the quote? God gives you what you think that you can handle. I just wish he didn't trust me so much. And I think that's Sister Teresa. We'll have to fact check that, but I'm happy to be here and happy to help.
You know, you're almost bringing me to tears. I think my sons appreciate me. I think, I know they do. I can't even say I think. You know, and I'll tell you a story. My youngest son was filling out an application, you know, when a recruiting questionnaire, whenever he plays football for the University of South Florida. And, you know, before that he played at the University of Florida Institute of Technology at Florida Tech. You know, when we were filling out recruiting questionnaires, one of the questions they ask is, who are your heroes? And, you know, I remember filling that out with them, doing that, and I said, okay, you know, somebody you look up to. And in my mind, I was thinking about Alejandro Villanueva. Now, some people may not know who that is. He plays left tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're huge Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Alejandro Villanueva was an Army Ranger. He saved people's lives. He's a war hero. He, you know, after the war, you know, playing professional football. When the first, back in 2016, when the I'm going to take a knee during our national anthem, when that first started to happen, he stepped out of the tunnel, and there's an iconic picture of him standing there with his hand over his chest as the national anthem played. And, you know, he said, I'm an American. I'm an Army Ranger. I'm an American. And I love my country. And you know, so, you know, I know that day, me and probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of people bought Villanueva jerseys. You know, I have 5 of them at home, 1 for every family member, you know, and, you know, so I expected my son to put that name down. And that was one of the names he did. And I said, there's 2 blanks here. Who else do you want to put down? And he pointed to me and he said, you.
My father was an Auschwitz survivor. So my father went through Auschwitz. You know, I grew up knowing that he was in Auschwitz. And he was part of a family, I believe, of 9, either 8 or 9 siblings, parents, many first cousins, and they all lived like in a courtyard with different apartments, and they all lived together, and they had a wonderful childhood. And at age 14, a 14-year-old youngster, they were all taken to Auschwitz, where basically, other than his brother, he and his brother, they were all murdered, exterminated by the Nazis. His parents, I believe his grandparents. I mean, I know they didn't survive, but I think they were alive at the time, but I'm not certain about that. Uncles, first cousins. He had a handful of relatives, of close relatives, maybe 2 or 3 that survived, and 1 brother. So imagine you're a 14-year-old child, and your whole world, your siblings, your brothers, sisters, parents, and you come out of that. My dad actually passed away when I was very young. I was 5 years old. So I almost do not remember him. But I do remember one story, and that's also something based on his experience of Auschwitz and so on that's guides me and is an inspiration in my life. I remember one story, one personal story that I repeat often because it's the only story I remember of my dad. My dad passed away from lung cancer, which incidentally can be also a result of Auschwitz, because we talk about the 6 million Jews who were murdered. We don't know how many, cancer and stuff like that could sometimes linger in the body. But he died at when I was 5 years old. But he was sick for like a year and a half. So I only have one memory, and that is one time he came home from the hospital. And I was, I think, like 3 and a half at the time. And I asked him, I walked into the bedroom, my parents' bedroom, and I asked him to please pick me up. And I remember, just somehow this is a memory that stayed with me, so it must have left an impression. We're going back more than 50 years. I remember my mother saying, he can't, he's too weak, because he was going through treatment. But nevertheless, he bent down and he picked me up, he lifted me up. And that's the only memory I have of my dad.
Definitely went through my sad points, definitely went through loneliness points, where, the whole long run, will this ever end?
Right.
Will this be the new normal? It was the lack of accepting.
Right.
When things change, there's always this point where you just don't want to accept it. And it took me a while to accept it, but then I've definitely seen a growth since then, meaning I'm more focused. I kind of have more time to focus on myself, and it's definitely allowed me to stop caring about people's opinions.
Yeah.
Since I'm not hearing them anymore, I kind of just am able to zone out the music, if you could say, zone out the noise a little bit more. I'm not as caught up with who said what's the drama going on over here. It's just, what do I want to do? How am I going to do it? And will it be good for me?
Right.
Also, I've been able to spend some reflection time, and even my faith has grown. I've definitely been able to connect more with my faith, connect more with what I believe, and realize why I believe it.
Right.
It's easy to believe things when it's easy to believe in God when things are going dandy, when life is great, and when the road is smooth. But
it's not.
When it's not, that's when you really know.
Most.
That's when you really realize. Yeah. Is it worth believing, and do I believe? And I've definitely come out of that with the positive end, where I definitely feel stronger. I'm more focused and happier with my relationship in terms of faith-wise.
The issue of, is this God's punishment on us? And in the book of Romans chapter 8, it says the whole creation was subjected to futility. And that means there's going to be pain, there's going to be heartache, there's going to be different things that happen just in the nature of the fact that we live in a fallen world, a world that is no longer perfect. When a volcano goes off next to a populated area, that's not a judgment, that's a result of tectonic plate movement that causes the pressures to build up, and all of a sudden there is an explosion, and it may harm people or cause them to lose their property, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily a judgment by any stretch of the imagination. What it is an opportunity for those who care to get involved, to be able to help in the many different ways that we can help. One of the alternate translations of one of the most famous scriptures, Romans 8:28, is all things work together for good. But if you look at the footnote in most Bible translations, I believe that's the translation that should be in the main part. It says, God works with those who love him, so that all things result in good. And of course, good means some level of good. And so whenever we say pain, whenever we see suffering, whenever we see heartache, we have an opportunity to be used by God to help bring relief to that situation. And we've seen that through this pandemic in an amazing way. I mean, we've seen all of the different organizations, whether they're faith-based or not, having food distribution centers. We've seen grants. We've seen people being helped with rent. We've been seeing many different ways that people have said, man, this is awful. Now what are we going to do about it? And that, I believe, is the real purpose of any negative thing. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to help?
Faith plays a huge role in my life and in our family. In fact, I would say that our faith in God is the foundation of everything that we do. Obviously, I'm a pastor. I'm a Christian. And one of the things that has held us through a year like 2020, the COVID-19 and all its challenges, is our faith. You know, faith Faith is not having to see something physically to be able to believe it, right? And this is faith. The book of Hebrews in the Bible talks about how this is faith, that I don't have to see it to believe it. You know, we don't see the wind. We can't see wind physically, but we see its effect on the trees and the leaves, and we can feel it when it hits us, right? And I might not be able to see God physically, but I can sense his presence. I can see how he moves in people's lives and in my life, and I can feel him. And so I think that faith is so key, has been so key for my life personally, and my wife, my kids, our church. You know, we really believe that we are not just a human body. We're body, soul, and spirit. And so faith is that aspect that goes beyond the physical and even goes beyond the emotional. It really goes to the spiritual. And that's something that I think has been a huge, essential foundation in my life personally. Because I don't know, if I was led by just my emotions, I would be a roller coaster every day. You know, if I was led just by my physical cravings and appetites, then I would get in trouble, right? But when there's this spiritual aspect of me that can just receive peace in the middle of the storm, that faith that helps me believe we can get through this, that faith that says even if it's as small as a mustard seed, we can move mountains. That's the faith that has helped me personally. It's helped my family, and it's helped our church, I really believe, to grow and expand beyond whatever we could have ever imagined in the craziest year that we've ever experienced. That's faith. When we can see beyond what our eyes can see, and when we can believe beyond what our mind can conceive.
I look at faith maybe differently than most priests will talk about faith, or most ministers will talk about faith. I look at faith as a one-on-one relationship with your creator. In my case, I call him God. But it's deeper than a religious philosophy, a tradition, if you will, in my humble opinion. To me, faith goes to the root of your soul. It's who you are. I deal every day with people of no faith, people that are openly agnostic or atheist. I love them just the same. And I believe that God, my God, loves them just the same, regardless of their lifestyle, regardless of who they are or what they are, that he loves all of his creation. So I should be doing the same thing. For me, though, I mean, faith and religious tradition go hand in hand because of what I am and the fact that I'm a priest. I celebrate Mass, I hear confessions, I take care of people's souls. As a priest, as a chaplain, I take care of everyone, regardless of their faith tradition or lack thereof. And to me, that is my faith. That's my faith demonstrating itself to others. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how people get through life without faith. I spent time on the front lines in emergency services. I've taken care of people that have died. I have taken care of people that have just had babies. I've delivered babies. And I've had to tell people their baby's dead. And I don't know how you do that and then survive yourself without faith. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what being a chaplain's all about. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what your faith tradition is, it's having that empathy, it's having that care and that faith in something bigger than yourself, mm-hmm. that I choose to call God. Mm-hmm.
Those who were reluctant to use technology were forced to learn, and now they feel good about themselves having done so.
So working from home and that virtual side was very scary. I had to learn everything again. I had never done Zoom. I didn't even know the platform at all. And there were so many that came out at the time. But as I started to learn a little bit more about it, step by step, little things were happening here and popping up there. Again, people started to get online and really do the FaceTime, getting in front of Zoom type platform. I started to do it. I started to incorporate it in my process. Now, I wasn't happy about it. For me, I'm a people guy. I like to get out, meet people, shake their hands, the connectability is very important in my business. I could feel when somebody's there, I can feel when somebody's not. And when they are, that helps me, it gives me the juice I need to keep moving forward and help them to the direction they need to go. So not having that and being online was a scary moment for me. Because I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to really look in their face. I'm not going to be able to look in their eyes. I can't see their body, the kinesiology in their body and the way they're moving. And so I heard more that people were doing it. It was getting to be more regular, more familiar. And I thought I have to be able to do that if I'm going to get in that arena with the people that need me. I have to be where people need me. And if they're online, then I need to be there. And that's when I kind of opened up and started learning more. I got my own coaches and people that I surrounded myself with to help me in the familiarity of Zoom and virtual and staying home. And I was able to bring clients on. And that's how I work now. I don't even go out anymore. It's all done through Zoom. So I share my experiences through Zoom and learn new ways to do it. We have breakout rooms. You can put people in different rooms and stuff. It's amazing what they can do. So I'm very excited about that. It's very great.
Yeah, I think that a year like this year, 2020, with everything that's happened, it causes one to have to re-envision everything. One of the things that I've learned in this season is understanding how to bring alignment between vehicle and vision and vehicle, right? For example, if I'm in the state of Texas and my vision is to get to London, then I need a vehicle to get there. And I could take a car from Texas to the East Coast, right? But eventually that car is not going to get me to London. I'm going to have to transition to a plane or to a ship, or something across the ocean, because sometimes, even though the vision is the same, the vehicle can't get me there. And so one of the things that happened to us in this year is, as pastors of a church, we have a clear vision. We want to help people to know God, help people to find freedom, to discover their purpose, and help them to make a difference in this world. And so all of the vehicles that we had were in-person services, in-person small groups in the community, right? And serving together and doing all these things. So we had a limitation. The vision never changed, but the vehicle had to change. So we had to opt for online services. We had to opt for Zoom small groups or any of these other platforms and apps that can bring people together on video. We had to opt for doing our growth track, which is how we help people discover their giftings and their passions, doing that in an online version. Same vision, but we just had to bring alignment between vision and vehicle. And so I think that this year has been an important year for us to understand that although the vision never changes, sometimes the vehicle needs to change for us to get to that destination. And it's caused us to reinvent ourselves. It's caused us to reinvent ourselves. It's caused us to think bigger than we've thought before, out of the box, and it's really helped us take steps that we may have never taken.
Some of the creative strategies that I've adopted that have allowed me to be, successful with teaching on this virtual platform, I think would include maybe just tapping into a lot more of what was actually there. I think if teachers are honest, we would say that all of these tools were available to us prior to COVID. I don't think we saw the benefit in all of them. When we talk about, technology and the use of, face-to-face learning, none of this is new. We have 6,000 kids in our school district where I live that attend school virtually on a regular basis. Prior to COVID, they've been attending school this way. And so we know that this platform works. Unfortunately, our kids that were on campus didn't get the opportunity to have their own Chromebook. Do you know how exciting that is? That students, each and every one of our students now has access to a computer that their families didn't have to go out and buy. So even though it seems like, oh gosh, this sucks, no, this is actually great. And to watch these kids, light up and blossom when they do something as simple as a PowerPoint presentation. We don't understand. That has been a struggle for years. I've taught in the high school setting. It's been difficult for them to do a PowerPoint presentation. And so I think we are pushing these kids beyond their comfort zones, but in a good way. The work that I'm seeing produced by these students, the cartoons, the videos, the editing, I don't know that we would have seen it had we not gone to this virtual platform. So as tough as it could be to do this, you know, face-to-face learning and in-person learning, I do believe that the students are getting something that will benefit them way beyond this COVID experience. The technology, the everything that they've had to interact with will definitely be purposeful and meaningful as they move forward in their education and their workforce.
Went on, we were ready. We had our programs up and running. We were taking registrations in May and June with the anticipation that the worst case scenarios, we push it back a couple weeks, but we're gonna play. Creating different programs from, you know, putting something on a Wednesday night that we haven't ever done before. And the program itself was a multi-sport program as opposed to a sport-specific program. So each week the kids were able to come out and try a different sport. So one week was football, one week was basketball, one week was soccer, whereas in our normal programs, they come out for 4 or 7 weeks of the same sport. So it was something where we were, all right, let's give them something else to try, a new something different, especially with all these kids who've just been trapped in the house and may or may not have played any sports or a different sport or something. Just give them something to go out and do and have fun and be kids. And that's, honestly, that Wednesday night program was so much fun. I didn't really know what to expect just as far as registrations go, but you know, we had 50 kids sign up in a matter of 3 weeks with very little, if any, marketing. So. And from there, the parents were like, when are you doing it again? So that's very nice to have that problem.
There is always hope, even when the future is unclear. For those who have faith, that hope is real.
You know, we always need to leave room for hope. I know that's the foundation of this project. And if we don't leave room for hope, people are going to be left desolate in many ways, wondering what's it all worth or what's it all about. There is a better day coming. We are going to get through this. We're going to get through the isolation. We're going to be able to do the things that we'll enjoy doing again. And it's not going to take the social isolation that we've had to experience. And so that's the hope I want to be able to offer to people as we think of, you know, what's coming in 2021. 2021 is not going to be 2020. And I believe that we're going to have a year where we start to appreciate once again the things that we were able to do and took for granted. And they're going to be a whole new meaning to those things again, even the simple things, such as just being able to shake someone's hand.
My hope for the year ahead and for the future is a bright one. I think that the best is yet to come. And I would hope that anybody who's watching this, listening to this, would be encouraged and filled with faith and filled with hope to believe, you know, yes, there have been challenges. Yes, there's been loss. Yes, there's been difficult moments, but the human spirit perseveres with faith, with friends and family. When we look to the future, we can be filled with hope. I believe that we're going to come out stronger on the other side of this. I believe that we're going to come out of this better. I believe that we're going to come out of this with stories to tell. And I believe, because I have faith, I really believe that we can make a difference in the midst of these challenges when we not only think of ourselves, but when we think of how can we help others.
My greatest hope for 2021 is that people would become more in tune with their purpose in life. That we would silence the noise, because right now there's a lot of noise. There's COVID, there's this, there's that. That we would silence the noise and we would take time to really sit down and reflect, like I had to do this year, and figure out what is my purpose in life. Why am I here? Why was I created? It's definitely for something bigger than me. And I think if that happens, the path moving forward for 2021 will hopefully look a little brighter. So that's my prayer, is that we'll just all self-reflect and focus on our true purpose in life.
Message of hope for 2021 for individuals that's watching. Man, don't give up. Don't quit. Don't quit on yourself. Don't give up on your family. Don't give up on your loved ones, because everybody's here for you. And even if you don't know that person or don't know anybody, trust me, there's somebody that's out there who's willing to help you. All you have to do is ask. So for 2020, I think the message of hope would be, don't give up. Don't give up.
The future is uncertain. We don't know how we're going to develop our plans or how many things are going to change the world. But what we do know is that we have reached the end of a unique year, out of the ordinary, and those of us who have survived will not only feel stronger, but more self-reliant.
Could this have been a way to prepare ourselves for larger events?
We don't know, but whatever happens, we must continue to navigate through change, surviving, learning, and using what we have learned to help those in need.
Now we know that whatever the future holds, we will be able to navigate through change, not only be able to survive, but thrive and still believe.
One thing that I've learned about my wife, Gislaine, is that she is very wise. And sometimes her wisdom, and I'll say this, I'll be honest, I'm being transparent here. Sometimes her wisdom bothers me because it proves to me how right she is on a certain subject or topic. But
how has this idea of safe distancing impacted you, your family, your business?
It's really funny. So even before I get into the business part of it, I was giving my daughter a bath last night, and she has her little Disney princess figures in the bathtub, and she was putting them, 2 feet from one another and on the ledge of the bathtub. And I was looking at her, and I was like, "What are you doing, sweetie?" She goes, "Oh, they're social distancing, Daddy." And I was like, "Oh, my 4-year-old daughter is social distancing her Disney toys in the bathtub. This is what we've come to." So.
Then it's made it all worth it.
Nice. Do it again, please. Igualito, los dos.
Okay.